So, to start us off, I would like to address Lovisa Selander from the Baltic Development Forum. I'm having a bit of trouble with all the gadgets here on the stage. I know that you have just convened quite a big conference yourself of 300 participants, which was back-to-back to the HELCOM ministerial meeting, convening a lot of stakeholders around the region, touching a lot upon some of the same issues we're touching upon today. So I think we'd be eager, and I think it'd be interesting for the audience to find out some brief reflections from the outcome of this meeting, as well as maybe some key recommendations, and particularly maybe on the private sector on how to engage them. Yes, you just press the button there. Ooh, there you go.
Okay, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
So thank you very much, and I'm glad to be here. We organized a conference in October 3rd in Copenhagen, the Baltic Sea Conference 2013, Blue Growth, Sustainability and Water Industries. And we had the pleasure of doing that together with the European Commission, DG Mare. And I'm sure we'll get some of your reflections as well on that. And this was a platform where we gathered both public and private sector actors to try and discuss these challenges together. And I will briefly mention a few key points that came out of those discussions. This was a full day and 300 participants. But we all seem to be agreeing that the Baltic Sea region is already a front runner when it comes to blue and green growth. And we are well placed, as we also heard Fredrik Lind describe earlier. We're a prosperous region, we're strong in innovation, we have a long tradition of cooperation, we have platforms to use, we have the strategy for the Baltic Sea region, not the least, which is a very good starting point. And there is also an environmental awareness in this region. And the standards that we've set, they are high. And with that also comes a responsibility to actually reach the goals that we've set. We noted that we need to strive for coherence in environmental regulation across and beyond the Baltic Sea region in order to ensure a level playing field for business. And those that are going to take up the role as first movers, they shouldn't risk losing out because of delays in enforcement and so on. That was an important point that came up a lot. And when we talk about the region, sometimes the Baltic Sea region is not even enough, especially if you talk about the shipping sector, which operates on a global market. For them, it's extremely challenging to have specific rules on emission control, for example, within a specific region. And they're finding it very challenging to deal with the new emission targets on SOx and NOx, for example. So in this case, maybe it should be a political priority to reach coherence on a global level instead of a regional level only. We also noted that this is a timely issue. Not only do we have strong support from the EU, but several countries in the Baltic Sea region are launching national strategies on blue growth. And maybe we should look at what the regional synergies are amongst those. We noted that we're strong in innovation in the Baltic Sea region, as we heard before, but that maybe we're a little slow on moving from research and innovation to actual implementation. And that we also tend to allocate funding towards research, but not as much towards innovation. And we also have strong maritime clusters in the region, but they're also fairly research focused, and they could benefit from cooperating more and competing less. We noted also that growth, including blue growth, requires investments, and maybe we can do more to attract foreign investment to the Baltic Sea region and promote the region better in this field. And in this context, we can also point at a project which the Baltic Development Forum has that brings together the investment promotion agencies from throughout the region. And it's coming out pretty clear that they all have a strong focus towards clean tech. But the maritime industries is not at all within that scope and on the radar. So that's something that we can help point them towards to attract more investment to that sector. And we also noted that there is a need for more platforms for these kind of stakeholder consultations where you engage both the public and the private sector actors. It's very easy to talk about what we need to be doing in terms of regulating economic activity, for example, but any regulations that we enforce, they need to be realistic and they need to be doable for those that are actually going to be the ones carrying them out. So those are a few messages from the day.
And where do you see, I mean, or where does BDF see itself in the future? I mean, I think you've listed quite a few things there, but where do you see as being the key role now in terms of the future and building of the strategy, in terms of convener or facilitating the process forward in terms of the private and public sector?
BDF could serve as an interface between the public and the private sectors, and that's also what we're trying to do. And BDF is also engaged in the EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region as a horizontal action leader, for example. But we're also trying to promote the strategy to other actors and to inform both public but private sector actors of funding opportunities, ways to engage, and what's going on at the moment. But it comes down to having forums where the private sector is actually present. We saw that we only had 3 people in the room. So if you actually want to engage the private sector, they need to be where the discussions are taking place. And BDF publishes this State of the Region report every year. We published the 2013 one in September. And one of the findings in that report was that one of the major weaknesses of the strategy for the Baltic Sea region is a lack of engagement of the private sector within the strategy. But maybe we need to look at how we communicate, not only to look at what forums we're present in, but maybe we need new types of messages in order to make the case for new actors to be involved in this.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Heitsi, do you want to say a few words in terms of the conference that you jointly did with BDF before we move on to other questions?
Sure, I think this is exactly as Lovisa said. One of the things that we are trying to promote is that you get the best out of the use of the marine resources that we can possibly get. And that means moving towards sustainability, making sure that whatever new technology, new business, new approach we develop is something that is in harmony with what the resources are available to or able to deliver for us. And in that particular context, having organized a conference of this nature, which actually brought together a large number of people from the private sector with representatives of those who had been negotiating the same day in the HELCOM Ministerial Conference, was really, I think, a winning concept, even if in terms of timing things didn't work out 100%. But anyway, the combination was there, and it's a concept which I think is going to be very useful for the future. It's something which certainly is ideal to do in the Baltic, where precisely these 2 elements, the work towards sustainability and the growth of innovative maritime industries are both key topics.
Great, thank you. I wanted to turn my attention to Eric and Eva, who are both coordinators on a national level in terms of the strategy, and to hear a little bit your thoughts in terms of what's needed on the ground, so to speak, what's needed on the operational side from a country perspective in terms of trying to realize these goals now that have been addressed, in terms of also, again, the public and private sector actors to try and cooperate, but maybe even also between the authorities and the European institutions. So, Eva, I'll leave you the floor first.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me here. I'm glad to hear for the second time on this 4 scenarios for Baltic Sea region report. It was presented like a month ago, 3 weeks ago in Poland during a conference organized by Chief Inspectorate for Environmental Protection together with the F in Poland, and the main topic for this meeting was environment, because of the challenges in the region and because of not least recommendations from the HELCOM. But in Poland, the NCP is within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is kind of encouraging all partners to work together on the challenges and to see the possibilities where we can join our forces and what we can do together. It's about getting people together and see how much each of us do in the region. Quite early with the implementation of the strategy, we found out that individual efforts will not bring results if we don't stand together. So we created a task force or working group, you can call it differently, a group of people who are meeting regularly to look into how fast and how good we implement a strategy for the Baltic Sea region. And it's now, after these 4 years, giving fruits. The exchange of information and support for one another are crucial elements, because we know that many of us are present in different areas, and we also try to attract business. Quite recently, with the view of the Polish presidency in the CBSS, which starts in July 2015, so 2 years from now, we invited high-class experts, mainly from academia, doing not only things within environment, but also infrastructure, also health, education, culture, so civil protection, to support us in the MFA in our thinking about the Baltic Sea region. And there we tried to also attract the business. It was not easy, I must say. We also had like 3 companies who maybe don't see the possibility yet, but we know that in the northern part of Poland, in the regions, things are happening quicker on the smaller local scene, where you have local administration, municipalities, where you have local business, small and medium-sized enterprises, where you have educational institutions and well, everyone who see that if they stand together, if they do something about the cleaner beaches and a better offer for the tourists, they are better off as people and institutions together. So it works a bit better on the local level. We try to attract these big companies present in the business cooperation in the Baltic Sea region. It's not big successes yet, but I hope that we can continue our encouragement for them to be involved. But as I said, the role of the MFA in the Baltic Sea strategy, and also in the other forums, because we have CBSS, Northern Dimension, HELCOM, Baltic 21, VASAP, Northern Dimension. Our role is to get people together and to make it clear for everyone how much we still have to do in the Baltic Sea region to have it safe, prosperous, easy, accessible for everyone, and to have good lives. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Eric, in terms of the Sweden perspective on this?
Yes, well, thank you. I think we need to remember that one of the greatest added values of the strategy is that we're introducing something that you recommended at the earlier presentation, an integrated approach to resolving the issues in the region. And we're trying to do this in tandem. We're addressing the environmental challenges that I think all in this room are very well aware of. At the same time, trying to resolve how to create growth in the region. And this, I think, this strategy has introduced this in a rather new fashion that has not been in the region before. And one of the other side of this strategy, or the new component introduced, is we also have a link to the European Union. And this is hugely important for us to have this flying. We have the institutions committed to the challenges of the region. And I think in this region, we are all aware of the need to address the environmental issues in the Baltic Sea. I read a report saying that 98% of the Swedish population have at one time or the other visited the Baltic Sea. They know the Baltic Sea. The figure was very high in other Baltic countries as well. Like in Lithuania, it was 80%. So awareness is here. It's very clear and it's very evident. But I think the issues and the challenges have not been very clear in the European community or European Union and in the institutions. So this, I think, is different now, and this is very helpful to us. So I think we need to keep this in mind. And when it comes to engaging private partners, I think it's mostly about facilitating for them to get engaged, arranging with platforms, but also in policy areas showing that we're actually proactively supporting for the policy sector, which I represent, that we actually are supportive of those companies that are proactively investing in more environmentally friendly solutions, like shippers, improving their prestanda when it comes to sulfur and nitrogen, which is actually happening. So I think, in contrast to earlier comments, that actually we should go ahead and support those companies that are investing for the future and showing that this is actually a benefit in the future playing a level field. Thank you.
And Eric, do you think this would be quite a good example? I mean, Frederick came with this idea of the Singapore model I mean, trying to engage on all levels, so both government initiative as well as the business coming in and being an incentive. I think we've talked a lot about research and innovation, but that lack of, kind of pushing it towards it being operational. Would that be something realistic in this region or in Sweden, for example?
I think it's interesting enough. You have to keep in mind Singapore is a city. We're 8 member states in a community, in a context which is much more complicated, perhaps. But still, I think it's worthwhile learning from others, certainly. And I'm sure we could learn something from a national level as well. I know too little about these examples to say clearly anything, but learning, yes. But don't forget, it's a little bit complicated atmosphere we're working with.
Yeah. Thank you. Frederick, do you have any comments in terms of your experience when this happened? As I know you've worked a long time in Asia and Southeast Asia with trying to innovate new business.
Yeah, so I spent 7 years working in Southeast Asia, based in Singapore, actually advising both the Malaysian and the Singaporean government on a couple of infrastructure-related projects. So I think there's 2 things that stand out as different if I compare my coming back to Europe and Sweden, which is dimension number 1 is around aspirations. I have to admit I started to like people who are a little bit more aspirational than maybe what they could or should be, but to be a little bit more bold and say, why can't we in 10 years time build a new city the size of Gothenburg in southern Malaysia? Iskandar project launched 3, 4, 5 years ago, and why don't we attract 50 or 100 billion US dollars in funding for this, and why don't we bring the best companies around the world? I mean, that was the business plan that was written. Similar style with Singapore, who stated 2006 that we can become a global leading blue technology hub in Asia. And no one really, thought that was possible. So I think there is some learnings around being a little bit more aspirational than what you are comfortable around being. That's one kind of key takeaway and difference. The other thing is, I also start to like the public-private partnership philosophy in many emerging markets, in particular Southeast Asia, where it was not so complicated, but if the government and the telecom operator thought that fiber is a good thing, why don't we have a public-private partnership in rolling out fiber in a clever way in Malaysia? Agreed, I think 2008, launched 2010, very successful, etc. So if we can be a little bit more aspirational and a little bit more practical and proactive on public-private partnerships, I think the 9 countries around the Baltic Sea would be in a better place in a couple of years' time.
It sounds like you've been influenced by the Asian leaping higher than the mountain is, so excellent. So I want to turn now to, we actually have the EU institutions here, so 3 different DGs. We have Axel and from DG Regio, Heitze from DG Mare, and Giacomo from DG Environment. And I mean, what's interesting is you also have to coordinate in that level as well, in terms of you have the EU strategy as the umbrella, so DG Regio, and within that you also have to achieve the good environmental status, which is DG Environment, and then you also have the blue-green growth and the maritime policy under DG Mare. So from outside, it seems like there needs to be a lot of collaboration also from this level in terms of trying to get these policies to work and to achieve that on a broader regional level as well as a national level. So in practice, this collaboration, how do you see moving in the same direction to try and get all the different sort of goals and objectives to also bring in the public and private sector? Maybe I'll start with you, Axel.
Well, first of all, I think it's worth underlining that in the context of the Baltic Sea Region strategy, the EU services are really working very well together. I mean, we have Environment, Mare in the panel. I see Agri behind there. The funding is key from my perspective. I mean, 50 billion euros. This is the cohesion funds for the Baltic Sea region in the coming 7-year period. 50 billion euros. This is something that we are trying to promote today. You have heard it several times, to mobilize the funding. We have 50 billion euros that we can pick from. And to reach our objectives, we don't need to use all of it. And I think the dialogue between the different DGs on the programming of these funds has been very valuable. We have different roles. DG Mare, which with the blue growth perspective, coming in with a potential for economic growth. We have MOVE with the transport position. We have agriculture with the modernization of the common agricultural policy and rural development. And I think really this is a sign in the time that also the EU is approaching this in a very integrated way, and of course this also means bringing in the private sector. I mean, we're talking about funding. This is not only about EU funding. This is about private sector. This is about NGOs. This is about national governments and regions, and it's basically finding the right sources of funding, the right actors to make the right decisions at the right time. And some of these decisions certainly need to be taken now or in the next couple of weeks and months, because otherwise we have lost a 7-year window for working seriously on these important challenges that we have. And as Fredrik said, we have quite a large economic benefit that potentially lies there waiting. There is also other evidence from last year's Baltic Stern report, quoting the socio-economic benefits of dealing with the eutrophication in the Baltic Sea region. I mean, it pays off. It makes sense, and therefore that's really the reason why we keep repeating it. That we need to see the intentions of member states and regions in the planning for the 7-year period, that the objectives that have jointly been phrased in the Baltic Sea Region strategy needs to be met by active commitment and financial, administrative resources. Thank you.
Thank you. So, and Giacomo?
Thank you very much, first of all, for the invitation. I would like just to give concrete example of this strong cooperation between the DGs to face these challenges. For example, in my position, I basically sort of contact person in DG Environment for all the issues related to territorial cohesion. I can assure you we are more than adequately involved. DG Region all these issues. I know with DG Mare, especially from my colleague from the Marine Water Unit, there is a very strong and very good cooperation. For example, there was in the proposal for the directive on maritime spatial planning and integrated coastal management that should be hopefully adopted in not a long term. And also from a more policy point of view, but was already said today, the Baltic strategy, for example. The Baltic strategy is a very useful tool for the implementation of environmental policies with concrete action on the ground. It's really like a very good and focused way how to pass from policy side to concrete action, concrete projects. For example, there are, you know, of course, the environmental aspect are very well integrated in the strategy, and there are several flagship projects that really very well address our main policies in the field. I mentioned, for example, was already mentioned the Marine Strategy Framework Directive. Of course, it is a very important policy framework for all the activities also in the Baltic, but also address like very important policy framework like the EU 2020 biodiversity strategy, that also several actions foreseen in these strategies are addressing specifically water issues. And going to the financial part, and also to possible cooperation, public, private. I would say, for example, now is not adopted yet, but probably most of you know that the main financial instrument for environmental policy is the LIFE program. And there are a couple of aspects I would like to underline, particularly the first one is very important in this context. The fact that now are foreseen new, we can say, kind of project, the so-called integrated project. Integrated project means that our project could be developed using different funds, EU fund, but also other public fund and private funds. So this is a very good way of cooperation, of joint, facilitate really joint effort in the sense also public-private sector. And on the other side, also there is strengthened the region, even multi-regional aspect. So it will be somehow easier to develop a project at a transnational level. For example, very relevant for the Baltic. Also, the cross-sectoral approach is more underlined. And also, just I hope another useful information, will be also a possibility to involve other non-EU countries, but I, of course, here I underline that, of course, for the benefit, the activity should be always for the benefit of the EU territory, but also in this sense could be, I think, useful instrument in this sense.
Okay, thank you, Giacomo. And Heitze.
Yes, I hope we're not getting too repetitive here with this massive Commission presence here. That would be sad. So I'm going to try and pull things together a little bit. The first thing that occurred to me, hearing the discussions here about where we stand in terms of sustainability and what we want to do if we want to make growth successful, is that the Baltic Sea is really a microcosm, if you will. It's a microcosm of what is either happening elsewhere in the world already, yes, or is going to happen elsewhere in the world. And I think that is what makes it so particularly interesting and relevant to work on the Baltic Sea area in the context of blue growth. Secondly, and this is where the various angles that we all cover come together, is there is a lot of good work already being done in terms of cooperation and in terms of regulation or governance. You have HELCOM and the Baltic Sea Action Plan, covered by DG Environment, obviously, but which are actually very successful in certain respects. I mean, one of the things that they have achieved is achieving one of the biodiversity targets, I think, from Nagoya ahead of time, if you will, and certainly as a model for what could be happening in other areas. In the context of fisheries, I was looking at the presentation from Boston Consulting about what should be done in the context of fisheries, and you will not be surprised that I will tell you that what we've achieved now in the context of CFP reform, both in terms of reducing of discards and achieving maximum sustainable yields for a number of fish stocks, is something which is ahead of the curve here in the Baltic, and not necessarily elsewhere, where we're still hopeful that this will be moving forward after now we have concluded the fisheries reform. If you look at emissions reduction for shipping, again, yes, you can gripe about the fact that this is specific to the Baltic Sea region, sulfur emission reductions, and hopefully at some point also soon nitrous oxide emissions reductions. On the other hand, what you have seen as a consequence of this is that there are a lot of operators in the Baltic Sea area who are working specifically on technologies to make shipping more green and more clean, and this is something which has a huge potential for the future in terms of what is going to be happening soon in other sea areas around the European Union as well. Now, what do we want to do or need to do in order to keep all of this rolling and keep it working as effectively as possible? First thing, I think, is all actors in the Baltic Sea area need to keep working together to achieve sustainability as part of growth and growth as part of sustainability. This means innovation. It means research. It means making use of all the networks that are possibly that you can possibly find in order to move this innovation in that direction as good as possible. And why not think about something that has been done in some of the regions around the Baltic Sea area, such as the launching of a master plan for maritime technologies for the whole of the Baltic Sea area, which could really be a huge kick forward in terms of developing maritime technologies that also make sure that the Baltic Sea environment is functional. Then in the governance context, we talked a lot about integrated governance, about getting the scorecards from red to green and so forth and so on. I would just pick out one example. I would say, quit playing political games about proposals such as our proposal for a directive on maritime spatial planning and integrated coastal management. HELCOM and WASAP have set very ambitious targets for the Baltic Sea area in the area of maritime spatial planning, and this proposal will help you achieve them. So why not just make sure that it gets the support that it needs in order to pass the hurdles of the two co-legislators in the European Union. And then finally, I want to echo what Axel said as well. Please, and what was said earlier in the plenaries this morning, look at the funding. Make sure that what is available now and what has been made available in a far more transparent, coherent and cross-cutting form for blue growth in the new funds is actually used in that context when preparing the partnership agreements and the operational programs. And in that same vein, think about other funds as well. Horizon 2020, again, coming back to research, is going to be crucial here. And think about using financial instruments such as the European Investment Bank or the Nordic Investment Bank that can help in supplementing the money that's being made available through the European structural and investment funds.
Thank you. That was a lot of words in a very short time. I'm very impressed by the speed there. So I think we got funding as one of the major ones. We have some projects like the LIFE project, thinking more cross-sectoral, as well as thinking of projects not just being in a small area, but on a regional scale, and integrated governance. And we have the MSP directive, or the MSP, which is one way forward. So I would like to turn to the audience if anybody has any questions at this point. I see a hand there. The lady there. So if you could please just introduce yourself and the institution or organization, and then your question, please.
Okay, good evening. Honorable speakers, thank you for your presentation, thank you for your discussion. It was a great pleasure. My name is Olga Solotka. I represent Yanka Kupala State University of Grodno, Belarus, as well as Baltic University program. My question is quite broad, but still reasonable. And here it is. Well, in your scenarios of development of the region, as far as I understood, you've been using mostly the analysis of, let's say, situation in the region itself. But still, Baltic Sea region is connected with other countries, with other regions, economically, but first of all, ecologically. I'm from Belarus. I'm not from an European Union country, but still, the river of Neman, the river of Daugava are flowing into the Baltic Sea, and what's going on in Belarus, what's going on in Russia is going on here in the Baltic Sea region. So what are the concrete tools which are used to evaluate and to predict this influence, ecological, economical, political, and social, which goes outside of the region? What are those tools of evaluation? So I would be very grateful if you will answer me precisely. Thank you.
Okay, let's see how precise we can get. I maybe can start, and maybe Fredrik, you can follow in terms of the BCG report. But when the scenarios were done for WWF, we actually had about 50 stakeholders that met together, which discussed about what were the priority issues for the future. And through that, we condensed it down to find out exactly what were the issues and where they were going. We had stakeholders from all the region, unfortunately not from Belarus, but we did have some from all the 9 countries around the Baltic region. So it was very much focused actually on the coastal area. But you have an excellent point there, because the catchment area, of course, is 4 times more water body than the Baltic Sea itself. So absolutely, there are a lot of countries around there, like Norway, Belarus, that have a big influence, and those need to also be targeted. And one discussion is whether, I know through HELCOM there's been discussions about looking at how you can have bilateral agreements or discussions about how to work to, for example, with the problem of eutrophication in terms of the nutrients, to try and have those discussions, although they're not per se sitting in some of these regional bodies that we have today. Very good point, thank you. Do you want to add something, Fredrik?
Well, very briefly then, on the report, I have to disappoint you that the scope of the report was to take a very Baltic Sea approach. Having said that, I have to admit I liked your question a lot, and I think you are spot on, but that was not the scope of the report. I think the only link we did, which is worthwhile emphasizing, is that there is an export link in the report in terms of if we can do much better regarding Baltic Sea issues with regards to eutrophication, hazardous substances and overfishing, that is definitely exportable to other parts of the world. And we are not unique here having those issues. So very good question.
Okay, thank you. Axel, you also had a comment?
Thank you. I think it's very good to get a question on neighboring countries, since I'm from a neighboring country myself in this context. Now, regarding Belarus, we tend to forget mentioning Belarus when we talk about the neighboring countries. I think it's because Russia is so big, but certainly Belarus is involved in the strategy certainly on project level. There's quite a good, as far as I've learned, nutrient reduction project in Belarus as well, called Presto, helping training staff, raising the skills of people dealing with municipal wastewater in the country. So I think this is quite a good example of the benefits in Belarus, and of course for the Baltic Sea region, of the wider integration between EU members and non-EU members. And I certainly hope that Belarus will continue participating in the Baltic Sea region in the future as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope that was concrete enough. Any other questions? We have time for one more question. The lady there with by the video stand or the camera.
Thank you. My question is
yes.
My question is very short, so maybe you have time too. I'm Charlotta. I'm from Finland, representing Baltic University Program and Åbo Academy University. My question is directed to Mr. Siemens. Is it correct? Yeah. Did I understand you correctly that? Do you think that the EU proposal for the directive of maritime spatial planning and integrated coastal zoning is completely unnecessary? You said something about that HELCOM had already done everything, that quit playing political games, and do you think it's necessary to make this directive?
Okay, I have a quick answer and a longer answer. Obviously, we would not propose it if we didn't think it's necessary. That's the short answer. And the longer answer is that, and what I tried to say, but obviously I was speaking too quickly. What I was trying to say is there's a lot of work going on with respect to maritime spatial planning and integrated coastal management in the European Union. But equally, a lot of it is very diverse. It is done by member states who are doing it on an individual basis. There is attempts at cooperation across borders, which is one of the key elements for us in there, but these are not consistent or coherent. And in the context of the Baltic Sea area, for example, there is a lot of work and reflection going on in the context of HELCOM and VASAP as to the implementation of maritime spatial planning, particularly in a cross-sea basin context for the whole of the Baltic Sea area, but it's a completely voluntary concept. And it's our conviction that if you do have something which is a framework within member states, within which member states can develop maritime spatial planning and integrated coastal management across all sea basins, by the way, in the European Union, not just in the Baltic. But if you have a legal framework for this, that this gives you a far stronger guarantee that this will actually happen within the timeframes that people have in mind, than an approach where everybody has brilliant intentions, but the moment that there is a hiccup here or there, these intentions can go out the window just as quickly. So I hope that that clarifies that I certainly did not mean that it was unnecessary.
Okay, one more question.
Maybe I just can ask without the microphone.
Okay.
My question is to Mr. Frederick Lin, and you mentioned the biofuel production as a prospective business in context of blue and green growth of the region. Is the energy output bigger enough than the inputs so we could call the biofuel production as a sustainable business? And what about the use of fertilizers and future soil quality?
Thank you for another good question. I think our main point is around looking at these issues from an innovation angle and go at it in terms of trying to innovate and do things in a new way, commercialize, build companies, or make bigger companies bigger in terms of driving commercial innovation successfully. That is the theme of the report. And then we had a couple of examples in the report, and I'm not a biofuel expert by no means, but I think within the biofuel area, in terms of alternative energy, in terms of green energy, there are lots of room for innovation, and we would like to push that forward. I don't have a point of view on specific technologies or specific answers, but we love innovation, and we think that's part of the solution going forward.
Thank you. So I just want, before we thank the panel, I want to give you all one last word in terms of rounding up. I'd like to ask each one of you one sentence in terms of, we've heard it's very much about save the sea, connect the region, and prosperity. So jobs, jobs, jobs in the short term, as Laurie Evans put it, but also to ensure the sustainability in this development so that we also have an environment that functions and can support this. So I want to ask you if you have a bring home message or in terms of next steps you will take from this annual forum. Heitze, start with you.
All right, it might be a very long sentence, but so blue growth in the Baltic for me means combining innovation and sustainability, and doing this on the basis of giving ourselves the strongest possible framework within which this can be achieved.
Thank you.
My words will be a kind of longer, because I hope that Poland will be able to continue with the investment in environmental area as we did. According to Ernst & Young's European Investment Monitor, investment in the environmental sector in Poland amounted to an average of around 630 million euro in the last 6-7 years, which created in 2012 50,000 new jobs in the clean tech sector. So I hope to continue, but the words as a take-out message will be let's work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva. Giacomo.
Key words for me: resource efficiency is a priority in the next environment action program, not adopted yet, hopefully very soon. And also, as you know, in the Europe 2020 strategy. So well underlined at the top of the agenda. This is very important. Of course, there will be many others to mention, but I would focus. This is
okay. Thank you, Luisa.
Yes, the blue growth and the green growth concept. With those, we're trying to achieve economic benefits while also ensuring sustainability. And that's a rather new concept. So instead of trying to regulate economic activity to ensure sustainability, we're trying now to make actors involved in economic activities become drivers of sustainability. And I think that's a new area, and we might not have all the answers yet, but it will involve having to motivate new actors and to maybe look over the messages we use. And we also need to explore the relationship between sustainability and prosperity, because even though a healthy ecosystem is a prerequisite for any economic activity, the costs associated with technology reform or emission compliance, for example, those costs might not be taken by the same actors that then harvest the benefits of a healthier ecosystem. So maybe that's something we need to be very aware of.
Okay, thank you. Erik?
Well, very simply, the integrated governance approach. We need the three objectives all together. They're reinforcing each other: save the sea, connect the region, and increase prosperity. And that is the integration I would like to see in our policy making in general.
Thank you. Axel?
And my message is for the planners of the programs again: use these next months wisely so that we have the tools to integrate these three policy areas. Thank you.
And Fredrik, this being your first annual forum conference, what will you take home from this?
No, my key takeaway is, reflecting on it, is I think we collectively need to have higher aspirations. And by that, you know, some people are talking about blue technology ambitions. I want to talk about blue and green combined. Sometimes we're talking about doing a pretty good job, or we have done lots of good things. I would like to have an aspiration that we want to be best in the world on blue and green technology development, because I think we can be that. Thirdly, I would like to see both EU amending the Baltic Sea strategy to talk about world-class blue and green technology ambitions, and I want to see that in respective country national strategy. So I want to push forward a higher aspiration as my key takeaway from my first Baltic Sea event. So thank you, Ottilia.
Great, thank you. Can we please give a round of applause to the panel? Thank you very much.